Hey everyone, this is Electra. I have got some good things to talk about tonight. I had some really intense, I think, downloads today, insights as to what our new coalition needs to be, and and eventually the new party that we need to form to do what needs to be done in this country. Because I don't think the Democratic Party is capable of reform. If it was, it would have been starting it by now, and it's not. So we need a new party, we need a new vehicle. And I think in order to do that, we need to have the coalition first so we don't build a party for absolutely no one. We need to know who's going to be in it before we build a party. That seems reasonable, right? I'm continuing my reading of Charles Sumner by Zaakir Tameez, and I'm really enjoying it. I read some things in here today that I'm going to read to you because I felt really inspired when I read it, and I think it applies to our current situation so much that we we have the power, we have the right side of history that we are on, and the thinking and feeling people that know we are going down an evil path. We know we know that we have the right side. We know we're on the right side. We know we have truth and justice on our side. But the thing is, how do we implement that? How do we invite that into the physical world to actually make a difference somewhere other than our minds and our feelings, thoughts and feelings? So let's take a look here. John Quincy Adams was a pretty close friend with Charles Sumner towards the end of his life, and I don't think people remember uh, how after his presidency he was a Congress. He was in the House of Representatives, and he was extremely anti-slavery. He basically hated the South and everything about it, and he was a radical. He became more radical as he got older and hated slavery even more as he got older, and because he survived until 1848. And so, should have prepared for this. Thank you for bearing with me. And what did I see that was really good here? Basically, it talks about how Charles Sumner founded the Free Soil Party, which I was well aware of. It was a precursor to the Republicans, the original Republican Party of anti-slavery and basically northern northern feeling, which ended up fighting the South in the Civil War and defeating the South and slavery. So, what did I see here that was so inspiring? Damn it. Okay, here we go. And I've actually spoken about this in the past in some of my early videos, way back like during the very opening weeks of this regime in January and February. I was speaking of this idea of cloaking progressivism in the robe, the clothing or the shell, whatever you want to call it, clothing progressive rhetoric and policies within the cloak of conservatism. That is how you get just the average people to that don't think they're progressives and don't think they're liberals and never will be. That's how you get them to sign on to progressive and liberal ideas. If they think it's conservative, if they think it's from the basis of conservatism, which in a lot of cases they are, and that's one of the things I love about Lincoln is he became the first Republican president by presenting a very radical and liberal idea at the time of anti-slavery as a conservative thing, because he presented it as like we were going to implement what the founders actually intended for this country, which was we were all born equal. And slavery clearly was a huge contradiction to that. That was not intended. it was intended that slavery would die out on its own, but due to economic forces, it actually continued to grow up into the Civil War in 1861. So, but by cloaking this anti-slavery radicalism into this idea of we're actually going back to what we were meant to be, to what our Constitution actually said that we are. We're going back to that. So we're being conservative in that we're going back to the original idea of what this nation was founded on. And this book talks about that exact concept that I discussed a few months ago. And the way they discuss it is, so Sumner here is like, he finds himself in the Whig Party, but he's not in the conservative faction of the Whigs, because he pissed them all off when he gave a very provocative speech on the 4th of July one year in Boston, and basically saying that, you know, like the military has no reason to exist, and like half the people in the crowd were basically military members and veterans. So the rich people of Boston, whom he was very close to and getting closer to every day, he basically they all turned against him because they realized he was becoming a radical and he wasn't going to be on their side in the future. So Sumner found himself in this new faction of the Whigs that became known as the Conscience Whigs, which were the anti-slavery Whigs, the younger generation, the so-called Cotton Whigs that were not pro-slavery, but they were more than happy to profit from it via the cotton and textile industries. Those were the people like Daniel Webster. So the Conscience Whigs were the ones that had a conscience about slavery. They didn't think it had any right to exist. Our country never should have had it in the first place. So by referring back to the original plan and ideas of this country and what it was supposed to be, even though it was a radical idea, it was hearkening back to this previous idea of the founders or the Constitution and what we were supposed to be. And the Declaration of Independence just is actually, it's rooted in that more so than the Constitution. But Sumner actually was really enamored with the Constitution as an object, because it was meant to always be amended. It was never meant to be this just document that was stuck in time and can never be changed as our lives changed, and as we move into the future, things were going to be way different. So, okay, so I'm going to read this paragraph. So knowing that Sumner is now he's known to be a radical, but how did he get himself to be considered not as radical as the radicals, if that makes sense? Sumner distanced the Conscience Whigs from abolitionists and radicals in his speech. Quote, "The Whigs have been called conservatives," he noted. He said that conservative was the right word to describe themselves. The Whigs should be conservators of the ancestral spirit, conservators of the animating ideas in which our institutions were born. He continued, "What did this conservatism look like? It is," and the quote starts again, "It is the conservatism of 76, as in 1776, end quote. So now we continue the next paragraph. No quotes here. This is the author. "Sumner hearkened to the founding fathers, who in 1776 sealed with their blood," and that was in quotes, "the principle," quote, "that all men are created equal. In the Declaration of Independence, to carry out their conservative vision, Sumner said the Whigs should rely on another document the founders wrote, the Constitution. Quote, "The Constitution contains an article pointing out how at any time amendments may be made," he said. "This is an important element giving to the Constitution a progressive character." He explained that the founders didn't have a problem making compromises with slavery because they thought it was gradually declining. Since this did not happen, it was time to amend the Constitution to eliminate those compromises in order to fulfill the founders' moral vision. End of paragraph. Next paragraph. "Combining conservative and progressive rhetoric and ideas, Sumner pitched a democratic means to fulfill the founders' mission and bring the Constitution into alignment with the Declaration." and this is my remark, is that not what we need to do right now, almost to a T? Okay, back to this. The idea was so inconceivable that few anti-slavery men had ever bothered to suggest an amendment to the Constitution to abolish slavery and declare equality. For roughly 40 years, the Constitution had remained the same. Much like today, the Constitution was treated in the mid-1840s as a near sacred text that was nearly impossible to amend, like today, okay? Yet beginning now and for the next 2 decades, Sumner would advocate for an abolition amendment. He got the idea from John Quincy Adams, who had recently proposed one in the House. So that, I think, is all you need to say about that. But here's another thing. So, okay, let's talk about John Quincy Adams and how he passed away. This is going to relate to the unanimous motion or resolution in the Senate yesterday to observe a day of mourning for a certain person that is no longer with us. I think you know who I mean. If not, ask in the comments, I guess. So, John Quincy Adams, if you didn't know, he had a stroke on the floor of the House of Representatives because what happened here is the Mexican War had just ended. And so, of course, people like Sumner and John Quincy Adams were very, like 100% against the Mexican War because it was so blatantly a power grab, a land grab for the Southern power to spread slavery west all the way to the West Coast and California, the future state of California, Arizona, New Mexico, etc. And so, when the House, okay, I'm quoting now from the book, when the House entertained a resolution to honor the veterans of the Mexican War, the 80-year-old congressman, John Quincy Adams, stood up to cast his vote. No, Adams yelled. He then collapsed to the ground, and several other representatives rushed to his aid. A young Whig congressman who was sitting just a few feet away, Abraham Lincoln, watched in stunned silence as Adams suffered a debilitating stroke on the House floor. So much like we saw yesterday, this was in the House, though, but the House passed this gratuitous, brazen, gross, frankly, resolution to honor the veterans of the Mexican War, whom people like John Quincy Adams and Sumner, the conscience Whigs, mostly from New England and like possibly New York, they were able to say no. It was literally John Quincy Adams's like last action in the House of Representatives before he died of a stroke. He actually died of a brain hemorrhage 2 days later. Imagine if we had somebody in the House yesterday that did that about this day of remembrance. Imagine that. That is the party we need. That is what we need to, that is the ideology we need to be. We do not make compromises. We do not buy into this idea that it's the wrong battle to fight, because this is the battle. This is exactly the battle. It's a proxy for what the battle is going to be, what the war is going to be, frankly, that I don't think is really avoidable anymore. I hope it is. I still hope it is, but I feel like we'd be moving in the right direction by now if we were to avert it. And so let's think about what this new party is going to be. How can I sum it up in 1 or 2 sentences? I think it's pretty simple. We need a party that is going to outflank the Democrats from the left on social and domestic issues, with a few exceptions, but nothing major. So things like guaranteed abortion in all 50 states, no questions asked. I don't know yet about the time frame into it. that would be up to, now that'd be up for negotiation, but the basic right to abortion would be enshrined in our Constitution with the constitutional amendment. We would also have the right to health care, you know, basically everything we've wanted for the last 15 years, but haven't had the political will or capital to do it. And that's one of those loud cars I hate that I've been talking about. Okay. So that takes care of the domestic and social issues. But what about foreign? Affairs? And how do we? What are we going to do to like? What do we do in regards to the certain region in the world that's having some issues right now? I'm thinking of two of them. And well, I think in a lot of ways we actually need to outflank the former Republican, now fascist party from the right, if that makes any sense at all. Because if we are going to project power into around the world, it's got to be projected in a way to where we win. We have to overwhelm anyone who thinks that our values and the way of life we project is in any way questionable or objectionable. Case in point, two specific people these days in two different regions. We need to be able to act decisively, forcefully, and when we take a military action, it needs to be so quick and so painless and so grief-free as much as possible that we do not shy away from a war if and when it needs to be fought. And when we do fight wars, everyone's going to be involved. Rich kids don't get out free. They have to serve just like everyone else. And that's going to help social cohesion and just everything on the domestic front as well, because there aren't going to be these stratified classes that don't interact with each other like we have right now. I think that's the basic framework we're going to have. So we're basically going to go left of the current day Democrats on social issues, okay? And in terms of like military, foreign affairs, warfare, we're going to outflank the Republicans on the right. And in other words, we're just going to like expand the boundaries of political orthodoxy and normalcy outwards on both sides to meet the challenges of the 21st century and onward. And that's all I really want to talk about today. So let me know what you think about all this. I think it's genius, frankly. I mean, of course I think it's genius. It's my idea. But in terms of the name of the party, I'm thinking there's two. I mean, I've been thinking of the Liberty Party, even though I know that name has been used before it was another anti-slavery party, the very first anti-slavery party way back in like the 1830s and 40s, before the Free Soilers. So that's happened before, but I love the word liberty. I've been obsessed with the Statue of Liberty my whole life. I'm looking at one. I have an image of it up in my apartment right now, and I have a little tiny rubber version. I had a bronze version of it, like it was bought at the actual souvenir store on probably on like Ellis Island or something. My grandparents bought it like in 1985 or so when they visited New York City from Niagara Falls, where they lived. I don't know whatever happened to that. I wish I kept it, but I'm not sure where it is. So the Liberty Party, or yeah, I don't know. I mean, another idea I have is like the neo-Republicans, but I just think the word Republican is just going to be so poisoned for so long. It might never be used again in like a legitimate political party in this country. I mean, ideally, we don't have political parties at all. That's what the original plan was. But it's just the nature of, I don't know if it's possible to not have them. Or if it is possible, it's not going to be in the next 50 years, for the rest of our lives at least. So what do you think of my plan? I think this is pretty remarkable, and I think it's what the country needs. It's what we need to really be who we really truly are. as a country. When I knew I wasn't being who I truly, really was, I did what I had to do to start my gender transition, divorce, my ex-spouse, get out of a marriage that I knew was stifling me and not allowing me to be myself. I made these things happen. This is the spirit of our times, is we have to just expand what's possible, but from a thinking and feeling point of view, which means we first have to destroy the fascists and the people that are holding us back. And then we can basically become this new party of expansion and going further on the left for domestic and social issues and further on the right for the military and warfare and just asserting our dominance around the world. Okay. So what do you think about all this? I would like to know your thoughts. What do you think we should be? What are some policies you think we should go for domestically and in foreign affairs and military matters around the world? What do you think could be doable? If anything is possible, which it will be if we can take control, what would you enact? If you had your one choice in the new government to do whatever you wanted, what would you do? What would be your thing? That's what I want to know. And I hope to hear from you in the comments. Please like, share, subscribe if you like this type of content. And about me, I'm a 45-year-old male to female transitioning, transgender, for about the last, almost 2 years now. I'm gonna start saying almost 2 years. And I've been on HRT for a year. So, I've been fighting intense depression, anxiety. I found out I was bipolar 2, or at least provisional, a few months ago. Well, not, what am I saying? It was like a year and a half ago. And what else? Yeah. So, I talk about things like mental health, work. I'm about to move states and move to a new city. I talk about current affairs and politics and things that I think could actually be done. So I hope to see you on this channel more often, and take care. Have a good night. Bye.